Hi y'all, welcome to my shop. This is an episode on making a chessboard. When I first started this project with making chess pieces, I realized I need to make a board, and I didn't want to make a traditional kind of board because that's kind of flat work. I wanted something a little different. I'd taken a couple of wood burning pyrography classes with Cynthia Gibson, and she's just a really terrific pyrography wood artist. And she does a lot of wood burning and decorating on wood turned pieces. And so, like I say, I had a couple of different workshops with her because she was a member of my club. So I saw a couple of pictures on the internet, on Pinterest, with a board where they had decorated the squares, kind of like a sampler board. And I was intrigued by that idea, and I thought, okay, well, I'll make one like that. So here's what I came up with. I made the bottom as a piece of 3/16 inch plywood that I got from cabinet shop. It was left over from making the drawers to this shop storage unit. The sides here are some cherry cutoffs that I'd gotten from a friend of mine who worked at a cabinet shop when I first started wood turning, and I'm still working through some of those cutoffs, so they work out real well. So I designed this with 1 3/4 inch squares because I thought that was appropriate size for what I'm doing. The World Federation of Chess, from what I understand, the standard competition board is more like 2 1/4 inches for larger pieces, and I wanted my set a little bit smaller. So I sized the board and then sized the chessmen to fix it. I wood burned with a sampler, and I'll give you some close-ups of some of the detail of this. And then I doodled this little frame or border around it. And I'm going to show you how I went about making this chessboard.
I use an Optima 2 burner unit. It has similar characteristics of the razor tip unit, but it's about 20% cheaper. Here's a close-up of the 3 pins I used. One's a skew and the other 2 are ball tip pins. One is a very fine tip, which I generally use for writing my signature on the bottom of my work. The form of doodling I used on this board in the squares is called Zentangle. You can see the book I learned it from. This is a new item for you, just JGI. Just Google it. Perhaps I'll cover this in more detail in a future video if there's some interest. It's a great technique for turned eggs, Christmas ornaments, bowl and platter rims, and other items. I took some 4x4 cherry scraps, and after sizing to 1 1/4 inch wide on a table saw, I ran them through the thickness planer until they were 3/4 inch thick. Then I used my router table and put a 45-degree chamfer on all sides of each piece. I then used a slot cutting bit on the router table to cut a 3/16 inch slot to hold the board. Here's a picture of my miter sled. I should have made one of these miter sleds a long time ago, but finally made one for this project, and it made it much easier to get near perfect miter joints. I assembled the sides of the board by adding a little glue to the corners. I used yellow carpenter's glue, Type Bond the original, and I let it dry. The actual board floats in the slots, and I did not add any glue to the slots. After the glue dried, I cut a slot for a 3/16 inch thick spline on each quarter to add strength to each corner. I used maple to give it some contrast. I made a support block from a 3/4 inch scrap of plywood to make it easier to guide the finished board past the slot cutter, as you can see in this clip.
Here's how I made this little jig out of plywood to cut the slots on each corner for the miters. It's fairly crude, but it works pretty well. I just cut a 45-degree angle on that. I hold this up against it and then just run this across the slot cutter so it'll cut in maybe a half inch, 5/8 of an inch to put that spline in there.
This is one of the few projects where I did not use Minwax antique oil, but instead used lacquer. I'm no lacquer expert. I used a sealer coat of lacquer with about a 1-to-1 ratio of lacquer thinner to lacquer. I brushed this on with a cheap chip brush and then waited a couple of hours. Better quality brush would have been better. Later, after drying, I brushed on another coat of lacquer full strength, waited about 2 hours, brushed on another coat of full strength, and waited about 6 hours, and then lightly sanded with 320 grit before brushing on a final coat. I'll probably sand again with finer grits after it cures for a week, and then put on a coat of wax. Smelling lacquer can be hazardous to your health, and I wore a respirator. I've got a friend of mine that used a lot of lacquer in his youth without any form of a respirator, and he can no longer smell anything.
Let me show you an easy way to cut felt pads. I'm just taking a strip, folded it over four, cut me a little dowel, little cylinder. Just basically going to bring this up with some tailstock support against another flat scrap that I had from a spindle project. That holds it nice and flat. Come in here like this, and we're just going to simply slice those things with a skew. Just come in from the side. There we go. And now I have four perfect pads that I can put on the bottom of the board.